Thank you so much. Good afternoon. Today I'm excited to share with you some of the main results from our activities within the project and also some insights for the potential future development of the ECOLOPES project. This presentation is based on different contents, basically some main findings from the validation activities of the ECOLOPES project that has been coordinated by our research group, and also from some findings on my PhD on environmental perspective and environmental performances of ecological building envelopes. To begin with, let me just briefly introduce what is a building envelope and the main aim of the ECOLOPES project. What you can see here for the architects is really clear, is a section which represents the building envelope, which is just a layer, a surface that divides the indoor from outdoor. And here I would like just to very briefly introduce the main aim of ECOLOPES, which is to propose a radical change for city development where nature can co-evolve within cities. And to do so, we aim to propose a design process that can support the definition of ecological building envelopes, so envelopes that can host soil, but also plants, animals, and associated organisms, while fostering urban ecosystems. What you can also see here from this section. Among the main topics that has been deepened during the ECOLOPES project, there's also the impact of ECOLOPES on microclimate, and in particular on reducing the urbanite island effect in cities. Indeed, while adding soil volume and a high variety of plants on the building envelope, we can effectively reduce the amount of artificial surfaces in our cities, and so in summer conditions reduce the local surface temperature and increase thermal comfort conditions for humans, of course, but also for the other inhabitants and for the entire ecosystem. So through a comprehensive study, very long I have to say, we were able to demonstrate the effectiveness of these solutions in terms of microclimate regulation. And in particular, among the main results, we demonstrated that adding different type of trees and shrubs on the building envelope and the immediate surroundings can reduce local perceived temperature by more than 6 degrees, which is actually a lot. And we also discovered that when we deepen the performance of plants from an environmental perspective, we have to consider two main features. The first one are the geometrical properties and features. So basically the ones that are connected with the shape of plants that can produce shading and immediately reduce the perceived temperature, but also the radiative properties, which are the ones related, for example, to the evaporation processes, transpiration processes, and the photosynthesis, which also has a strong impact on microclimate. With this study, we not only demonstrated the effectiveness of these solutions, but we were also able to define and provide some very useful design recommendation for the design of the green building envelopes and ecological building envelopes. For example, the building morphology itself, the position of the building in itself, and also where to put plants on the building envelopes were among the most relevant parameters that we identified. And these aspects are really interesting if we are able to include them in the design process at early design stages, because in this way we can optimize, of course, the ecological performances of the building envelopes and also the architectural performances, but we can also assess the environmental performances of these kind of envelopes, just to add a small piece. But then, what is missing in this perspective? As stated before, we are focusing on the ecological perspective, we are focusing on the architectural perspective, for example, in relation to the soil volume distribution, window-to-wall ratio, and other kind of parameters, but we are still missing some aspects which are really useful for the future development of this project. The first one is the structural feasibility. If we want to really implement ecologically driven solutions, we should include the impact of the soil volume and the plants, water and other additional materials that we need to build these kind of solutions early in design stage, in a way that we can streamline the design process, we can reduce the potential problems, and we can also be able to really implement sustainable solutions. This is because this is really important because the additional weight of this kind of living elements is really substantial. And we always need to balance, as we also did with architectural perspective and ecological perspective, we always need to balance between the structural load, the amount of materials that are required to build effectively these kind of solutions, and the embodied carbon, global warming potential, and the emissions that are directly connected with these kind of solutions, with the soil volume which is needed to effectively ensure the ecological functions. So this is of course one of the key parameters and the key aspects that needs to be considered for the future development, but also, in my perspective, the climate responsiveness and the climate adaptability of these kind of solutions. For example, nowadays we are facing very, very strong environmental and climatical challenges, especially in cities. And the ECOLOPES solutions has been, in a way, perceived to be implemented especially in cities because of the lack of biodiversity, but also because we have a lot of opportunities there, because we have a lot of buildings, so we are effectively able to implement some solutions that can make the difference. So, for example, other parameters that should be considered, in addition to the urban Italia mitigation, which has, as I said before, has been studied in this project, are, for example, the stormwater management and stormwater retention that can effectively reduce the risk of flooding in the urban environment, but also the carbon sequestration, the particulate matter reduction, and other kind of parameters. And also in this case, it's always a matter of balance and trade-offs between what we are aiming for biodiversity with what we are aiming for the environmental sustainability of the solutions that we want to implement. Also, for example, as you can see in this diagram, we want to minimize the design-related emissions, of course, because international goals are asking us to do that. But at the same time, we want to maximize the soil volume, we want to maximize the stormwater retention, and also the reduction of pollutants in the air to improve the livability for humans, but also still for the other inhabitants that we are considering. And these three aspects are strictly related, because as you can see in this diagram, we can start from the concept, which is actually the level of detail that we are achieving now with ECOLOPES, with the technical development, which is also really, really important. And also in this way, through the technical development, we are able to understand, for example, which kind of materials we can use to develop these solutions and to implement them, which kind of structure we need, the costs of the solutions to be implemented, and the related impact. And only through the technical development, we are able to understand the details of the solutions and then to assess their performances in terms of structural feasibility, in terms of climate adaptation, and so on. So my suggestion is to implement them in the design process that we developed within the project. What you can see here is actually the design process from a user perspective that we developed during the ECOLOPES project, which was also described by Ferdinand earlier in this meeting, in this conference. And my suggestion is to include these very relevant aspects in relation, of course, to the KPIs, unit, and methods for their calculation and their assessment in the simulation environment and in the optimization process, because it's where we can effectively analyze the trade-offs between the different aspects and where we can reach a balance between ecology, architecture, and environment. So just to summarize, ECOLOPES has deepened these strong relationships between architecture and ecology with a lot of difficulties, I have to say. But in future, starting from the results that we achieved in these 4 years, we should for sure deepen these two aspects. Thank you.
Thank you, Francesca. Is there a question from the audience to this presentation? Because this is really diving into the work that we did in ECOLOPES, and discussing this also with the public is extremely interesting for us. So I will maybe ask a question. In relation to the KPIs that you're suggesting, what we understood is that it's very difficult to discuss the same language, even to quantify in the same language between architectural and ecological, I would say, aspects. So with the new KPIs that you're suggesting, where do you see the main challenges in bridging the gap in order to understand trade-offs? For example, when you talk about structural efficiency. So where do you see the challenges in light of the processes that we went through, in light of the optimization process that was developed, for example, by Suede with the nested hierarchy? How do you see this?
I think that here, in this case, the main challenge is that from an ecological perspective, we for sure want to maximize as much as possible the presence of soil in every part of the building envelopes. You know, we saw it with the design cases for the validation, and we discussed it a lot. But at the same time, does it make sense to have soil everywhere on the building envelope? I think that this is the main challenge that we have to face now, where it is more convenient to have soil on the building envelope for ecology, but also from the engineering perspective. I think this is really crucial, because also if we want to, at some point, to see some ecolopes in our cities, we have to face this problem very, very soon, because otherwise we cannot build it. So.
Thank you, Francesca. Okay, so we will... So finally, the online audience has arrived. Okay, so the question is this: how do you see a combination of green and grey infrastructure working together and finding an optimal balance between all of these considerations?
That's an interesting question. I mean, the short answer is that, of course, we have to include both grey infrastructure and green infrastructure, because sometimes we think that green infrastructures are always the best option, but this is not really true. This is always site-specific, it is always case-specific, design case-specific, and it can also depend on the KPIs. So I think that a combination and a collaboration between grey infrastructure and green infrastructure should be really, really important.
Good answer.
Thank you.
Okay. So thank you very much, Francesca.